Vine stood there, arms crossed over her chest, staring blankly at the table. Her lips were pressed into a tight line, and her eyes glistened with restrained emotion. The pregnancy hormones, she told herself, were not supposed to feel like this, not supposed to make every small word, every small gesture feel so sharp. He had said one thing, just one simple, thoughtless thing, but at that moment it was enough to break the fragile peace that had been holding them together that evening. Why can't you just eat what I make? She had snapped earlier, her voice trembling not from anger but exhaustion. You think it's easy standing in the kitchen when everything makes me nauseous? He had sighed that heavy, tired sigh that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his chest. I'm not saying you have to cook wine. I just said I will order something if you're not up to it. The way he said it, calm, detached, like he didn't care, had stung more than the words did. It wasn't about the food anymore. It was about how cold he sounded, how distant, and maybe, she thought bitterly, he really didn't care anymore. Now, hours later, she stood by the window of their bedroom, the moonlight washing over her pale face. The night was cold, October's breath had begun to creep in through the glass panes. Her eyes felt heavy, tired, but her heart refused to settle. Behind her, she could hear him moving quietly, the rustle of his shirt, the soft thud of his steps as he turned off the lights one by one. He didn't speak, didn't even look at her. That silent treatment, the one they both were so skilled at, stretched like a wall between them. Vine sat on her side of the bed, slipping under the blanket without a word. Her body felt sore, her back aching slightly, her mind still replaying every moment of the argument. She could still see the flicker of frustration in his eyes, the way his jaw tightened when she raised her voice, and how he turned away without saying another word. Her hand went to her stomach instinctively. The small bump was barely visible yet, but she could feel the quiet flutter of life inside her. That should have been comfortable. Instead, it made her heart ache because this child deserved love, laughter, warmth, and tonight there was none of that. Django climbed into the bed beside her, his side dipping slightly with his weight. She could sense him there, his warmth just inches away, but beneath reached for the other. The ceiling fan spun lazily above them, and the faint sound of cars passing by outside filled the silence between them. She turned to her side, away from him. A moment later, she heard him sigh again. Wine? He started softly. She didn't answer. I didn't mean to upset you, he said quietly, his voice low, uncertain. Her throat tightened. She wanted to respond, to tell him that she knew, that she wasn't even angry about the food anymore. But the stubbornness inside her wouldn't let her. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was that small, unspoken need to be understood without having to explain herself. So she kept her eyes closed and pretended to be asleep. Jungkook stayed quiet for a long while after that. He shifted once, twice, as though restless, then finally settled on his back. The minutes passed, the silence thickened. Eventually his breathing evened out, deep and steady, the rhythm of someone who had surrendered to sleep, or maybe just exhaustion. Vine lay awake, watching the faint line of moonlight crawl slowly across the ceiling. She told herself she didn't care if he slept peacefully while she lay there in turmoil. But when she felt a sudden tiny kick, the baby's soft protest against her tension, she exhaled shakily and whispered into the dark, It's okay, baby. Mama's just silly tonight. Her eyelids grew heavier, and at last the exhaustion won. The next morning she woke to warmth. For a moment she didn't quite understand why. Her cheek was pressed against something firm and warm. A solid chest rose and fell in a slow rhythm beneath her. Her hand somehow rested over a heartbeat that thudded softly under her palm, and there was a strong arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her close, deeping, keeping her in place. Her eyes fluttered open slowly, and realization hit her like a jolt. She was in Jungkook's arms, the same man she had refused to speak to the night before, the same man she had turned away from, huffing in silent protest, and yet here she was, tucked neatly into his chest, his chin resting lightly against the top of her head. She could feel the warmth of his breath against her hair, the faint scent of his skin, and the faintest trace of coffee. Her heart started to beat faster. Carefully, she tried to move, just a little, enough to slip out without waking him. But the moment she shifted, his arm tightened around her, instinctively pulling her closer. His grip was firm but gentle, as though even in his sleep he didn't want to let her go. She froze. "Jungkook," she whispered softly, testing if he was awake. No answer. She tried again, her voice a little firmer this time. "Jungkook, let go." This time a faint sound escaped him, half a groan, half a sigh. Stop moving," he mumbled, his voice still heavy with sleep. Her lips parted, caught between amusement and disbelief. "You are awake?" He didn't answer directly. Instead, his other arm came around her too, caging her like, "You were warm," he muttered, still half asleep. "Don't ruin it." Vine blinked, trying to suppress a small smile threatening her lips. "You are unbelievable," she said softly, pushing at his chest. "We fought last night." "Exactly why I'm holding you now," he murmured, his voice clearer this time. "I don't like sleeping angry." Her heart softened despite herself. She wanted to stay angry truly. She did. But the way his voice sounded, rough and sleepy and honest, made it difficult. She sighed, giving up the fight for now, and rested her back against his chest. For a moment she let herself listen to his heartbeat, steady and familiar, grounding her. "I'm still mad," she whispered after a long pause. "I know," he replied simply, his hand sliding gently up her back. "You can be mad all you want, and you are still cold." "I know that too." She huffed a small laugh despite her best efforts. "You are impossible?" "I have heard that before." The rhythm lightened a little. She could feel his smile against her hair, a quiet, genuine one that hadn't seen in a while. Her fingers unconsciously began tracing circles on his shirt. "You could have just said sorry properly," she said after a while, pretending to sound stern. "I did try. You pretended to sleep because you said it after midnight." She countered, lifting her head to glare at him. "And you sounded like you were apologizing to your laptop, not me." He chuckled, that deep, quiet sound that always made her chest tighten. "Fine, I will do it properly now." Wine blinked as he looked at her. Eyes still sleepy but sincere, that slight stubble made him look more handsome. Then slowly he brushed his thumb over her cheek. "I'm sorry, Wine," he said quietly, "for being insensitive, for not understanding what you're feeling, and for making you eat my terrible takeout plans." She laughed despite the tears pricking her eyes. "That's not funny." "I wasn't trying to be funny. I'm genuinely sorry about the food part. It was awful." She hit his shoulder lightly, and he grinned. That grin she hadn't seen since before their fight. For a while they stayed like that, jungle in each other, the morning sunlight spilling softly through the curtains. The silence this time wasn't cold or distant. It was warm, safe, and full of unspoken words that didn't need to be said. Finally, Wine whispered, "You know, you could cook for once." "I did once. You banned me from the kitchen." That's because you burned the toast twice. He gave a mock sigh. You see, no faith in me at all. I have faith, she said softly, her gaze meeting his. Just maybe not in your cooking. He smiled, leaning closer until his forehead rested gently against hers. Fair enough. There it was, that small fragile piece rebuilding itself between them. The rest of the morning went on quietly, but it was a good kind of quiet, the kind that felt like comfort rather than tension. Jungkook made tea badly, as usual, but she drank it anyway. He sat beside her on the couch, half watching the news, half watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. And every now and then their eyes would meet, and she would roll hers before smiling faintly. The sunlight that spilled into the living room that morning had a softness to it, like even the universe wanted to make up for the night before. Vine sat cross-legged on the couch, one hand resting on her small belly, the other holding a cup of tea that was far too sweet. She didn't have the heart to tell Jungkook that he had added nearly 3 spoons of sugar. He was standing in front of the stove, staring down at a pan like it was an alien object. Are you sure you know what you're doing? She asked, trying not to laugh. No, he said bluntly, but Google says it's easy. That's the problem. Google thinks everyone is Gordon Ramsay. He glanced over his shoulder at her, a teasing glint in his eyes. You are just saying that because you want to take over again. She raised a brow. After last night, not happening. You started this, so now you cook. He looked back at the pan, sighing dramatically. Pregnancy mood swings should come with a manual. She chuckled under her breath. They do. It's called patience. You might want to read it sometime. That earned her a quiet laugh, the first genuine one since the argument. The sound loosened something tight inside her chest. Maybe this was what forgiveness looked like. Not in grand words, but in small, ordinary exchanges that slowly knit things back together. Jungkook was terrible in the kitchen, but he tried. That Vine realized that was all that really mattered. Stirred, flipped, and occasionally yelped when the oil popped too close to his fingers. Every few seconds he had glanced toward her, as though checking if she was still watching him, and she was not because she doubted him, but because she had found that sight oddly endearing. Her cold husband, the man who once seemed too composed for chaos, now looked adorably uncertain with his spatula in hand. You're smiling, he said without looking up. Am I not allowed to? You only smile like that when I do something wrong. She slipped her tea. You burned the toast again, he sighed, staring down at the blackened sides. This toaster has a personal vendetta against me. You can't just admit defeat, you know. Never. I will make you breakfast even if the kitchen explodes. Now that's comforting, she said dryly, but her lips twitched into a smile anyway. He turned off the stove after a few more attempts, arranging a very modest plate of scrambled eggs, fruit slices, and half-edible toast. When he brought it to her, Vine looked up at him, disheveled hair, faint circles under his eyes, and that small proud smile on his lips. Her chest softened instantly. Jungkook, she began, her voice gentler now. You didn't have to. I did, he interrupted softly, placing the plate in front of her. I didn't do much yesterday. Let me at least do this. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Not the cold, heavy kind from last night, but a quiet filled with understanding. Vine set the plate down, her throat tightening a little. You are impossible when you're trying to be sweet, she murmured. I have heard that before, he said, sitting down beside her. They ate together, laughing at the mistakes, the over-salted eggs, the unevenly sliced fruit. It wasn't perfect, but neither of them cared. Each bite felt like a step closer back to normalcy, to the easy rhythm they used to share before hormones and exhaustion had started dictating their days. Halfway through the meal, Vine leaned back with a sigh. I think the baby hates your cooking. Good, that means they have taste. She tried to glare at him, but failed miserably when he grinned. You're going to be insufferable when the baby's here, aren't you? I'm already insufferable. You're just getting used to it. She shook her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. You really don't know when to stop? He met her gaze, then the teasing falling away, replaced by something softer. I know when to try, he said quietly, and I will keep trying even when I don't know what to do. Her heart gave the little squeeze again. The hormones made her eyes prickle too easily these days, but this time it wasn't just that. It was the sincerity in his voice, the quiet weight behind it. She reached for his hand without thinking, their fingers tangling together naturally. His thumb brushed over her knuckles in a slow grounding motion. You are doing fine, she said softly, even when you don't think you are. He smiled faintly. You say that now, but wait till you see me changing diapers. I will believe it when I see it, she teased. Challenge accepted. They sat like that for a while, the TV murmuring in the background, their joined hands resting on her stomach. It was such a simple scene, quiet morning light. Half eaten breakfast, the vain hum of life around them, and yet for Vine, it felt like the most peaceful moment she had in weeks. By afternoon, the mood shifted again, courtesy of her unpredictable cravings. They were in the middle of folding laundry when she suddenly stopped, frowning. I want something spicy, she said abruptly. Jungkook blinked. We just had lunch, so I want something spicy now, like golgappa or pav bhaji or oh, mom's tamarind chutney. He looked at her helplessly. Wine, your mom lives 3 hours away. Her lower lip jutted out unconsciously. You are saying no? I'm saying I will try to find something close. That's not the same. Wine, he exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. I would make it if I could, but. She turned away dramatically. Forget it, I don't even want it anymore. He stared at her back, torn between amusement and despair. You're sulking. I'm not. You are. I said I'm not. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. You realize you're arguing over chutney, right? She stiffened slightly, not wanting to give in. You realize you're making fun of a pregnant woman, right? Point taken, he said immediately, hiding a smile. She tried to wiggle free, but he only held her tighter. Let me go, she muttered. Not until you stop frowning. I'm not frowning. Yes, you are, right here. He tapped the space between her brows slightly. Your angry wrinkle. Stop calling it that. He chuckled, pressing his chin against her shoulder. You're cute when you're angry. Jungkook, she won, but her voice was already losing its edge. He turned her around gently, his hands resting on her shoulders. How about this? He said. We go out this evening, street food, anything you want, my treat. Her eyes softened. Really? Really, I owe you a chutney date. She bit back a smile, trying to hold on her mock annoyance. Fine, but you're driving. I would expect nothing less, ma'am. The evening air carried the smells of fried food, spices, and sugar, a dizzying mix that somehow felt perfect. Wine's mood had completely transformed by the time they reached the food stalls near the park. She moved from one counter to another, excitedly pointing things out while Jungkook followed, amused and indulged. He held the plates, fetched water, wiped her fingers when the chutney dripped. Every so often she had glanced at him and catch that quiet smile on his face that kind of said he had endured any chaos just to see her like this. When they finally sat on the bench under the flickering street lights, Vine sighed slightly. Okay, you win. This was a good idea. I usually have good ideas. He said lightly. She gave him a look, except when you say the wrong thing at dinner. Point taken, he said again, laughing softly. I will stick to feeding you next time. That's probably safer. They sat quietly for a few minutes, the sound of the market fading into a comfortable background hum. Vine rested her head lightly against his shoulder. You know, she said after a while, I'm scared sometimes. He turned to her, his expression softening. Of what? Everything changing, she admitted, of not being enough, of us not being enough. He was silent for a bit, then gently tilted her chin up so she had looked at him. Hey, he said softly, you don't have to be everything, Vine. You just have to be you. That's already more than enough. Her eyes glistened. You are sure? Completely. And if you ever forget, I will remind you. She smiled through the tears that threatened to fall. You have gotten better at this comforting thing. He chuckled quietly. Maybe I'm learning. Good, she said, leaning into him again. Don't stop learning. Never. By the time they returned home, the sky had turned deep blue, dotted with stars. Vine was tired but happy, that deep, satisfying kind of tired that came after laughter and love. As they climbed into bed, she nestled close to him without hesitation this time. His arm went around her automatically, his thumb drawing lacy circles on her back. You smell like tamarind and chaos, he murmured. She laughed softly. And you smell burnt toast. Fair trade, he said, smiling into her hair. She looked up at him, her eyes gentle. Jungkook? Thank you for trying, even when I make it hard. He kissed the top of her head, a quiet, tender gesture. Always. The next morning dawned quietly, sunlight pouring through half-drawn curtains, warming the edge of bed when Vine still slept, her hair a dark spill across the pillow. Jungkook lay awake beside her, watching the slow rise and fall of her breathing. He had never been a person, but there was something about these minutes before the world remembered to rush that felt sacred. Her hands was resting lightly over her stomach, the small invisible weight that now defined every their choice. He traced his thumb along her knuckles, careful not to wake her. In that stillness, he thought of the night before, the laughter, the street food, the glint of light in her eyes when she had teased him about burnt toast. He couldn't remember the last time her smile that looked that unguarded. When she finally stirred, blinking herself awake, he greeted her with a quiet morning. Morning, she murmured, voice soft and sketchy. Then, after a beat, why are you staring? Because you look peaceful. I look puffy, she said, yawning. And my hair is rebelling beautifully, he added. She rolled her eyes but smiled, shifting closer until her head found his shoulder, the kind of closeness that required no invitation anymore. Jungkook, after a few minutes of silence, she whispered, Promise me we will keep talking, even when I'm unreasonable. You are not unreasonable. He turned his head toward her. I am. Yesterday I nearly cried over missing chutney. He chuckled. And today? Today I'm probably going to cry over nothing at all. Then I will just hold you until you stop, he said simply. By mid-morning, the calm had resolved into ordinary life again. Vine wanted to tidy the nursery corner, Jungkook wanted her to rest. That alone was enough for round one of the day's small arguments. I'm pregnant, not made of glass, she said, folding tiny white onesies on the bed. And I'm saying you should sit down for 5 minutes, he replied, taking the pile from her. You are being dramatic. You're being stubborn. They glared at each other for 3 seconds before they both started laughing. It was almost comical how quickly irritation turned into amusement these days. Fine, she conceded, perching on the edge of the bed, but only because the baby cared. He crouched down, placing a gentle hand on her palm. Hey, you, help me keep her calm, okay? Vine's heart melted at the sight. His serious expression, the softness in his touch. You talk to the baby like they can understand you. They can. Science says they recognize voice. So you're giving lectures already? Someone has to balance your dramatic genes, he said with a grin. She gasped in mock offense. Excuse me? Too late, it's documented. I will tell them all about the chutney incident. Her laughter filled the room again, light and AC. That afternoon, they had their routine checkup. Vines always was nervous before good doctor visits, though she rarely admitted it. Sitting in the waiting room, she fidgeted with the edge of her shawl while Jungkook filled out forms beside her. He reached over, still writing, and squeezed her hand. You are doing great, he murmured. I haven't done anything yet. You have done everything, he said. You're growing an entire human. Her lips curved into a small smile. When you say it like that, sounds impossible. It's miraculous, he corrected softly. When the doctor called the man, Vine's nurse spiked again, but the moment the faint, the rhythmic sound of the baby's heartbeat filled the room, every other thought disappeared. That tiny rapid thumb echoed through the speakers, louder than their fears, stronger than their doubts. Jungkook froze, his hand found hers holding tight. That's our baby? He whispered. Vines nodded in throat tight. That's them. Neither spoke for several seconds. The steady pulse filled the space between them, pure and astonishing. Jungkook blinked rapidly, as if the reality had finally caught up with him. It's fast, he said softly. It is supposed to be, the doctor replied with a smile. Healthy heartbeat. Healthy. That one word snag deep into Vine's chest, untying a knot she had realized she had been carrying. When they left the clinic, she was quiet, one hand still resting protectively over her belly. Jungkook carried her bag, his usual chatter replaced by thoughtful silence. Halfway home, he finally said, You know, I think I just fell in love all over again. With who? She teased gently. He looked at her. Both of you? Back home, she slipped onto her comfortable clothes and sank onto the couch. Jungkook brought her a blanket and sat down beside her, still a little dazed. Are you okay? She asked. He nodded slowly. I just didn't expect to feel like that. Overwhelmed completely. It's a sound I didn't know I needed to hear. Vine smiled faintly. It makes everything real, right? Doesn't it? He turned toward her. It already was real, but now it feels bigger, like there is no space left for anything else. She leaned against him, her hand resting on his shoulder. That's love, I think. It's keep expanding until it fills everything. He kissed her quietly. Then I'm ruined. She laughed softly, in the best way. Evening settled around them gently, clouds painted in pink and gold. Vine was curled up on the couch while Jungkook tried to fish the crib he had assembled backward the previous weekend. Every now and then he muttered something under his breath that made her peek up, hiding a smile. Need help? She asked. Not from the person who called it a modern art installation last time. Well, you did attach the lengths upside down. I was testing gravity. He finally managed to tighten the last row and stepped back proudly. There, perfect. The crib immediately gave a soft creak, wobbling slightly. Vine bit her lips to stop her laugh. Maybe the baby will think it's a rocking crib. He groaned, running a hand through his hair. Fine, I will call the carpenter. You will get it right eventually, she said, her tone warm. You always do. Her faith in him hit somewhere deep. For a long moment, he just looked at her. The gentle curve of a smile, the calm after months of uncertainty. You know, I keep worrying that I will mess this up. She tilted her head. This, the crib? No, fatherhood, you, us, everything. She reached out, tugging him closer by the wrist. Jungkook, you're already doing it right. You show up, you care. That's all anyone needs to start with. He sank down beside her, exhaling slowly. You make it sound simple. It's not, she said, placing his hand over her belly again. But it's ours, and that's enough. He smiled then small, real. You always know how to quiet the noise. That's because you always make too much of it. Touchy. Later that night, they lay in bed, lights off, the city hummed faintly beyond the window. Vine was half asleep when she felt his fingers trace patterns on her arms. You awake? He whispered. Barely. He hesitated. Can I say something without you calling me sentimental? Probably not, she murmured into the pillow. He smiled anyway. I used to think love was about being in control, keeping everything smooth, predictable, but you keep teaching me that it's supposed to be messy, loud, and real. Her eyes opened, adjusting to the faint light. Messy love is still love, Jungkook. It's the best kind, apparently. She reached for his hand, blinking their fingers. You're learning fast. Maybe I have a good teacher. They stayed like that for a while. That no silence, no longer empty but comfortable, filled with the soft promise of tomorrow. Then, just as she began to drift, he added quietly, I can't wait to meet them. Her lips curved sleepily. You already have, she murmured. They are the one making me crave chutney at midnight. He laughed under his breath, pulling her closer. Then I guess I love chutney raw. Good, you will need to get used to it. Weeks would pass. There would be more fights, more cravings, more nights of silent stubbornness, and mornings of laughter. But in that moment, wrapped in each other's arms, the echo of their baby's heartbeat still ringing in their memory, they both understood something simple and permanent. Love wasn't of the absence of conflict. It was a decision to stay, to listen, to reach for each other even when words failed. Wine shifted slightly, pressing her ears against his chest. The steady rhythm beneath her cheek reminded her of the sound she had heard at the clinic. The day, strong, certain, alive. Two heartbeats, one promise. And as she closed her eyes, sleep finally claiming her. Jungkook tightened his arms around her and whispered into her ear, I have got you, both of you. The house was quiet again, but this time it was the good kind of that quiet that filled with warmth, with life, with love that no fire could undo.